Chapter 1: The Cold Feast. The chandelier above the dining table glittered like frozen stars. I remember staring at it for a moment while everyone around me laughed, drank wine, and celebrated. The room was beautiful. Marble floors, crystal glasses, expensive perfume in the air. But at the far end of that long dining table sat a man who clearly didn't belong. Me. My name is Arthur Blake. I'm 65 years old, and for most of my life I worked as an industrial electrician. My hands are covered in scars from high-voltage sparks and rusted steel panels. Hands that spent 40 years fixing things other people were afraid to touch. Tonight those hands rested quietly on a cheap plate of cold ham. I was sitting under the air conditioning vent on a hard wooden chair. The only wooden chair in the entire room. My daughter-in-law Clara said it matched my vintage style. The guests laughed when she said it. I smiled politely. Because sometimes silence is the most powerful weapon a man can have. The housewarming party was for my son David and his wife Clara. This mansion on the hill was supposed to represent their success. Glass walls overlooking the city. A garden that looked like something out of a magazine. Cars in the garage worth more than the apartment where David grew up. Clara stood at the center of the room wearing a silk dress that probably cost more than my first car. Everyone in the room admired her. Clara had that kind of presence. Confident, elegant, charming. But I had spent enough years working around live electricity to know something important. The most dangerous things are usually the ones that look beautiful on the outside. Clara tapped her wine glass with a spoon. Ting. The sound cut through the room like a blade. Conversations stopped. Everyone turned toward her. I already knew what was coming. Because electricians notice details. And for the past 6 weeks, I had been watching very closely. Everyone, Clara said with a warm smile. Thank you for coming tonight. Polite applause filled the room. This house means a lot to David and me. It represents years of hard work and sacrifice. More applause. I slowly cut another piece of ham on my plate. Clara lifted a folder from the table. But tonight, she continued, we also have an important family announcement. The room leaned forward with curiosity. Then she looked directly at me. Her smile changed slightly. Dad is getting older. I kept eating. His house in the city is very old and unsafe. Someone at the table nodded sympathetically. So David and I made a responsible decision for the future of our family. She paused dramatically. We're selling Dad's house. Whispers spread through the room. The money will go toward Leo's elite education. Leo. My grandson. The only person in that room who had ever hugged me without expecting something in return. Clara continued. And for Dad's well-being, we've arranged a beautiful retirement home called Golden Sunset. Several guests smiled approvingly. A place with doctors, friends his age, and professional care. Someone whispered near the table. What a thoughtful daughter-in-law. I looked at my son David. He was staring down at his plate, avoiding my eyes. That hurt more than Clara's words. Finally I spoke. And my opinion? The room went silent. Clara smiled again. But there was no warmth in it. Dad, she said sweetly, managing assets at your age is stressful. She slid a stack of documents across the table toward me. I've already prepared a power of attorney. The pen stopped right next to my plate. I'll handle all your finances. She tapped the paper gently. You just need to sign. I looked around the table. Rich investors. Corporate executives. People who believed wealth was measured by the size of your house. None of them noticed the scars on my hands. None of them noticed the calm in my eyes. But calm is dangerous. Because calm means the storm already passed through your mind. To understand why I didn't explode at that moment, you need to understand the last 30 years of my life. Chapter 2: The Philosophy of Silence. "30 years ago, I had nothing. Not even the old wooden chair I was sitting on that night. My wife had died after a long illness. The hospital bills swallowed everything we owned. I was left with a 5-year-old boy and a mountain of debt. I remember nights when David slept on the couch while I sat at the kitchen table eating dry bread and studying electrical blueprints. I worked every job no one else wanted. Night shifts, storm repairs, high voltage maintenance, anything that paid overtime. One night I was fixing a generator in the rain when an old German contractor named Heinrich gave me advice I never forgot. He pointed at a shiny sports car parked outside the site. "You see that car?" he asked. I nodded. "That belongs to a man who earns $100,000 a year and spends 110. I didn't say anything. He leaned closer. "Money is not for showing off." He tapped the side of his head. "Money is a tool for freedom." Then he said something that changed my life forever. Freedom belongs to the man who controls his money, not the man who displays it. That night I started building something far more powerful than wealth. Discipline. While other workers spent their overtime pay in bars and casinos, I practiced something simple. Small habits. Micro-discipline. I repaired broken appliances and sold them. I bought damaged electrical equipment from scrap yards. Fixed them. Resold them. I never bought a new car. I tracked every dollar in a notebook. It wasn't glamorous. But discipline grows slowly, like a tree. In 2005, I bought my first property. An abandoned warehouse everyone called a death trap. Broken roof. Burned wiring. Cracked concrete. Real estate agents laughed when I signed the papers. But I had seen something they didn't. A city highway blueprint pinned to a planning office wall. The future always hides in boring documents. At night, after David slept on a mattress in the corner, I rewired that entire warehouse myself. 3 years later it was worth 3 times what I paid. Then I bought another property. Then another. Then another. Eventually those properties were all placed under a quiet holding company. Serenity Holdings. No flashy logos. No headlines. Just quiet ownership. And I never told David. Because money without discipline destroys people. Chapter 3. What Clara Didn't Know. 6 weeks before that dinner party, I sat in a small cafe across the street from Clara's office building. She worked for Apex Development. Senior manager. Ambitious. Confident. Dangerously confident. She stepped out of a black sedan wearing heels and a designer coat. The kind of coat that costs more than my entire wardrobe. I watched her walk into the building while sipping my coffee. Then I opened the folder in front of me. Inside were bank records. Login attempts. Forged signatures. Clara had tried to access my savings account. She thought it contained my life savings. $20,000. I almost laughed. That account was nothing more than pocket change. A decoy. But Clara's greed had already revealed itself. What she didn't know was that her entire career depended on one thing. Apex Development needed a specific piece of industrial land for a $50 million project. She promised her company she could secure the land cheaply. She said she had connections. She said she knew the owner. She was half right. She knew the owner's son. But the real owner was sitting in that cafe. Me. I called my lawyer that afternoon. "Sterling," I said. "Yes, Arthur. It's time." He laughed softly. "I was wondering when you'd say that. Transfer the development rights. To Apex? No. To a blind trust. For my grandson Leo. And the mansion?" I looked at Clara's social media photo that morning. She stood in front of the house with the caption, "Hard work pays off." I smiled. Prepare the eviction notice. Chapter 4. The Revelation. Back at the dinner table, Clara pushed the pen closer. "Sign it, Dad." Her voice was losing patience. "The car to take you to Golden Sunset arrives tomorrow morning." I looked at her calmly. "My things?" She smiled. "Already packed in boxes by the gate." The guests shifted uncomfortably. I placed my fork down. The sound echoed softly in the room. Then I looked at my son. David. He slowly looked up. I taught you something when you were young, I said. A man's strength is measured by how he protects his family. I paused. Tell me, who are you protecting tonight? David's voice trembled. Dad, Clara says this is for the best. Before I could reply, Clara snapped. Enough with the emotional manipulation. She pointed at me. You're an old electrician with nothing. Her words cut through the room. You've outlived your usefulness. Then the doorbell rang. Everyone turned. A tall man in a dark suit walked inside carrying a leather briefcase. Clara's face turned pale instantly. She recognized him. The most feared corporate lawyer in the city. Mr. Sterling. He walked directly toward me. Good evening, Mr. Blake. I nodded. Right on time. He opened the briefcase. The paperwork is complete. Clara stood up suddenly. What is happening? Sterling adjusted his glasses. As per Mr. Blake's instructions, Serenity Holdings has rejected Apex Development's acquisition offer. Clara blinked. Serenity Holdings. Sterling continued calmly. And since this mansion was used as collateral for a loan connected to Serenity Holdings, and due to the discovery of forged financial documents. He paused. The bank has called in the loan. Clara's hands began shaking. What does that mean? I slowly stood up from my chair. For the first time that night, everyone realized something. I wasn't the weakest person in the room. You called me a burden, Clara, I said. You said I had nothing. I gestured around the dining room. You were standing in my house. The room froze. You're drinking my wine. Then I looked directly into her eyes. And you just lost your $50 million deal. Her voice barely came out. You. I smiled calmly. I am Serenity Holdings. Chapter 5. Karma arrives quietly. That night ended with rain. Heavy rain. Clara stood outside the Iron Gate with 2 suitcases. The same woman who once controlled boardrooms now looked completely lost. Inside the mansion, I sat on the floor playing toy cars with Leo. His laughter filled the room. Because in the end, money was never the goal. Freedom was. Clara lost her job 2 days later. Her reputation collapsed soon after. David stayed. Not in the mansion, but in a small apartment I arranged. He started working as a junior technician on a construction site. The same job I once had. Sweat teaches lessons money cannot. Months later he came to see me. Dad, he said quietly. I understand now. I looked at him for a long moment. Then I nodded. Because discipline learned through pain lasts forever. And if there's one thing life has taught me, it's this. Silence is not weakness. Silence is strategy. And karma rarely shouts. It simply waits. Then it walks into the room wearing a suit and carrying a briefcase.